All right, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. If this is your first time here, welcome. Everybody else, what's up? How are we doing? We made it to the other side. We're on the other side of the solar eclipse of 2024. And I'm being tongue-in-cheek about it. There's an awful lot of hype around it, but if I'm honest with myself, it does kind of feel like there's been some sort of realignment. And when I say that, I don't mean like, everything's like more aligned and more perfect or blissful. No, I don't mean like that. I just mean that there's been some kind of reset or reboot or mix up or something shifted. I don't know about anybody else, but over the last week, it just seems like all this stuff came up to the surface. And I'm not even talking about the episode I posted last week with my dad. I'm just talking about other stuff, totally unrelated from the podcast, just in my life, things that are coming up. Frankly, I just have a couple of really big decisions that are on me to make. And they don't have to be made quite yet, but they're definitely going to have to be made. And I've learned the hard way that if I don't have to make the decision yet, if I have a little time to just sit with it and wait, that's what I should do. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just sitting with it and waiting. And then at some point I'm going to have to decide, but I know I'm being vague. I can't talk about it now. Can't jinx nothing or screw up the process, but I'm just wondering if any other people feel like something shifted after the solar eclipse. For real. I don't know. I will say that I've certainly been reflecting a lot on life stages. I feel like I've entered this new life stage. I'm turning 52 this year. And I just remember growing up in the 80s, they always talked about having your midlife crisis, and the guy would buy the red sports car or whatever, or leave his wife or whatever. Not like that. It's not like that for me. I don't have that, but I do feel like there's a new aspect to the stage of life that I'm entering into that's new, and I'm trying to be accepting and not afraid. And I've been talking to my wife a lot about this. I think she has her own stuff that she's going through. And one of the things that she's been dealing with is menopause, which brings me to my guests today, Lizzie and Judith Lasater. As I mentioned to them at the very beginning of our talk, there was this total convergence of conversations I was having with my wife, along with an email from Lizzie and Judith about this new free mini course they're offering to people on restorative yoga for menopause and beyond. So it all kind of came together and presented an opportunity for me to talk about some of the stuff I was talking to my wife about and just catch up with Lizzie and Judith and hear a little bit about what's been going on with them and what this new thing that they're doing is. So it was really great to connect with them, and it's my pleasure to be sharing that with you today. Real quick before we get to that, let me mention a couple of things. First of all, we are currently offering a major discount on my newish on-demand course, the yoga modules. If you've been around, you've heard me mentioning it. We released it at the beginning of the year. I'm very proud of it. If you're looking for some continuing education and inspiration for your yoga practice and your teaching, I really think that this is for you. And frankly, I heard from a couple of people, money's tight right now. And believe me, I understand. So we're offering a major discount. I believe it is $299, which is way down from what it normally is. So if you had considered it before, but it wasn't possible, then maybe it is now. there's a big fat discount on my on-demand video course, the Yoga Modules. Also, I have a live event coming up May 4th and 5th in Austin, Texas. So if you or anybody you know is going to be around, let's hang out there. And also, I've got other stuff ongoing, live classes, the weekly discussion group. There's Podcast Premium. You can find all of my stuff, the on-demand video course, the live events, and the rest at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all. Let's just leave it there. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Lizzie and Judith Lasater. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Here we are, Judith and Lizzie together. You both have been here before individually, but never together. And it's lovely to have this moment with you. I'm already recording, so let's consider ourselves having just begun, okay?
Yes.
Okay.
How are you guys?
Amazingly well. Thank you so much.
Lizzie, how about you?
I'm good. We just celebrated my twin boy's 4.5 birthday this afternoon with a cheesecake, and their 5-year-old boy cousin came over. So we had like a lot of excited boy energy in my house.
Wow. 4.5. You're still in the thick of it.
Yes.
My eldest daughter's 14 and my youngest is 9.
Wow.
And the latest in our house was my 14-year-old daughter got asked out on this date by this guy.
Mm-hmm.
But she's 14. She skipped a grade, and he was going to be turning 17 soon. And me and my wife did not know what to do. You know, we're like, oh my God, it didn't seem like they were like in the same place, but whatever, that she rizzed him or whatever she did. But then the universe stepped in, and between the two of them, I got to say, he was pretty honorable. Like, he was like, you know what? I think the age difference is a little weird. And they kind of called it off, and they were both, it was for the best. Like, we didn't have to deal, but.
Well, we had a 2-year rule.
The 2-year rule? What's the 2-year rule?
If she was 14, 16 was we figured she could handle a 16-year-old boy, but 2 years ahead. That was our rule.
That sounds like a decent rule. In any case, I would also say that, to me, what's interesting about this moment that we're having as we start together today is it ties into something that I thought about in getting ready to speak with you, which had to do with what life teaches about different life stages. And I'll be frank with both of you. If you had reached out to me at some other time and said, hey, Jay, we're starting this course on yoga for menopause and beyond. Are you interested in talking about it? I might not have jumped as quickly as I did now. Because literally the day before I got that email, I had this big, long conversation with my wife, who just turned 50 and is going through menopause and has been like talking about it with her friends and her mom. She was talking about how different people look at it and what different things people were doing for it and all this stuff. And then your email landed right there. So there's a wonderful synchronicity that brings us together. I'm so glad you reached out. Thanks for doing that.
Oh, well, thanks for having us. We're really honored to spend this time with you and with your audience.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, before we get into it, what's been going on with the two of you? Where are you in the world? Lizzie, where are you right now?
So I live in Salzburg, Austria.
Right.
Which is a really beautiful corner of the world. I met my partner when we were in New York studying together, and he's from here. And then in 2011, he lured me here with a quote unquote 1-year trial basis. So we're still working on the trial basis. We just keep renewing every year.
Well, things seem like they're going okay, so why mess with it?
Exactly.
And Judith, you're still on the West Coast?
San Francisco.
Wow, you stuck it out.
So.
A lot of people have migrated away, from what I understand. Would you say that that's true?
That's not our personal experience. I mean, the city is really a lot better than it's portrayed in the media. still a lovely place to live. It has its issues, but not unlike many other cities. But it is a place that was founded by misfits looking for a better life, who came for the gold rush in 1849. And it has always been very tolerant, overwhelmingly so tolerant of your dreams and your differences. And I love that about it.
Yes, I lived there for 6 months in 1994, and I worked at Leather Tongue Video on 18th in Valencia.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a really,
where that is.
I had a really great experience there compared to like New York, especially too, because it had such a different vibe. But New York pulled me back and I went back to the other side. But I remembered feeling like a place for misfits, as you say. Well, I guess I'm curious what's been going on for both of you in terms of yoga stuff. You know, one of the things I've been talking about lately on the show is people kind of, you know, everything shut down, and then people have been kind of getting back into stuff again some, and things look very different than they look now. So I'm just kind of curious, what sort of teaching have you been doing of late? Has it been mostly online? Have you gotten back out on the road? I know, Judith, last year at the end of the year, I only did 1 or 2 like international gigs. One of them I think was in Manchester, and you were there the week before me. So I saw that you were out some. What's it been like for you, Judith, over the last few years in terms of like the teaching you've been doing?
Well, as far as online, Lizzie and I started teaching online. I think, was it 2015, Lizzie?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, about 2015. So by 5 years later, when the pandemic came, we were luckily, blessedly so, ahead of the curve. And we just segued into our online business, which has we've been doing ever since, and has grown and thrived, and we're very humbly grateful for that. But yeah, I'm back teaching, I think, starting in 2022, and I have upcoming trips to the East Coast and going to see Lizzie in Salzburg, and then teaching in London, where I've taught probably 20 years. I go there once a year. So I am traveling again and still teaching. Had a big birthday recently, 77. Wrote a book during the pandemic, Teaching Yoga with Intention, and doing a little less, not letting workshops, find me, really, not looking for more work, and enjoying.
Lovely. Glad to hear. What about you, Lizzie? Have you just been holding it down with the little ones? Have you been teaching any in-person classes, or just doing online stuff of your own and with your mom?
I would say I was lucky with the timing of the pandemic, because our twins were 6 months old on the first lockdown. And I remember just laughing, hearing it on the radio, the rules in Austria for the lockdown. And I thought, like, I'm breastfeeding 2 6-month-olds. Like, I'm already in lockdown. Like, it was like, don't go out after 8 p.m. Like, all this stuff. I was like, yeah. So that overlap was really lucky for me. I'd already had a year carved out with no travel. And then I've started again, but I just love being home with my kids. So I enjoy the online. I produce the courses with Mom. We also work a lot with a collaborator, Mary Richards, who we're doing this menopause course with. And so I feel like I have quite a full plate, working in the mornings when the kids are at kindergarten, and then Zooming in the evenings. And I'd say this year, 2024, I know I have 4 things on my calendar. Like, I'm doing a training in Holland, a restorative training, and then I'm going to teach with Mom in Montana.
Feathered Pipe, yay! I saw that. I was like, it lives. It still lives. The annual Lasater Feathered Pipe gig.
Yeah, we have so much fun at that. And then, like, I'm doing a retreat in southern Italy and teaching a workshop in Paris. So it's like I'm super lucky.
Lizzie,
I know.
Cut it out.
That's my year. But I'm in that really good.
To Paris.
No, I'm asking because I'm curious if people are having gigs, and I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but because it even with like the gigs that people are doing, it's not the same. Like the numbers aren't as like.
It's not the same. And I just am in a phase right now where my kids, they're so fun and I want to be here. It's so cozy and wonderful to be home. And I'm so impressed. And sometimes I think my mom, who's, 36 years older than me, has more stamina and endurance to travel and work and teach than I do. But mom just loves teaching. It's like magic to see her in a room with students live. And I think that mom just gets so much energy from it that it's like she forgets about the draining part of the travel, right, Mom?
Yeah.
And she agrees because she wants to be with the students.
But here's the thing. Tell you a little story. There was a Buddhist teacher, Joko Beck, who had a small zendo. She's passed now, but her books are excellent on Buddhism. And she was at this small zendo, and she was asked about, at her age, she was 80 or whatever, or more, like she got a phone call and the person said, I can't believe that you answered the phone. And she said, what else would I do? So I feel that it's my dharma. This is what, since I was 23 years old, I took my first yoga class. I got up the next morning and did what I remembered. It was black and white for me. This is my life. And it was more of a recognition. So I like in person because there's the chance, much better chance of that sharing of consciousness that is at the root of what yoga is. This acknowledgement of our shared consciousness is much easier in person.
Yes, but with all of the move online, that's what I guess I've been thinking about, like getting back into the room with people again. It feels more important than ever, but also more challenging than ever. Well, I'm curious to hear about why you've decided to do this course on menopause with Mary Richards. What was the genesis of that?
I feel like it came from me because I'm 41. And so I'm really looking at perimenopause, the 5 to 7, 10-year transition before menopause, which is then 12 months of not having any periods. That's coming. And my partner is 7 years older. So we have a lot of friends that are in their late 40s. And I'm kind of seeing it bubbling up all around me. And I thought, it's been the way I've led our online courses. Very selfishly, I consider myself student number one. And so a few years ago, I said, I want to learn more about anatomy. And then we ended up designing and creating this experiential anatomy course, which has been so much fun. And so this was another iteration of that, me just being like, ooh, yikes, this seems like it might be scary. I want to learn everything I can about it. And then I've been overwhelmed by how much it's resonating. It seems like so many other women are also really interested in this topic right now.
My curiosity there is when I asked my wife about this, she said when she spoke to her mom about it, her generation didn't seem to make as big a deal about it or something. I don't have the right way to say it is, but I guess, Judith, is there a difference, do you think, in terms of the way that your generation thought about menopause or talked about menopause compared to the way that Lizzie seems to be approaching you about it now?
Absolutely. They called it the change. They also called a lot of people, my grandmother called menstruation the curse. My grandmother didn't even tell my mother about menstruation. My mother had no idea. And when she started her period at school one day, she was terrified. She thought she was dying. She had no idea what it was. And that's not that long ago. So I don't think that previous generations experienced it any differently, but we lived in a culture which this was before the feminine mystique was written, before there was this, if you have a little broader perspective, I have a minor in history, so I love history. My mother was born in 1918. And in 1920, the United States recognized the inherent right of women to vote. You notice I didn't say gave women the vote. Recognized that. So my mother was born before women had the vote. And that's just one generation from me. So there was that was women's things, like, you didn't talk about it very much with your husbands. The sort of classic thing was that was just your thing, and they didn't want to know much about it. And so I think that the experience of it is not different in one or two generations, but the society, how it accepts it, how we're more free about talking about sexuality and, puberty and sexually transmitted diseases and all kinds of things about reproduction. I think that's what the difference is. Mm. Women have gained in some places more power and equality, or approaching equality in society. I remember being on an airplane and the pilot came on and it was a woman, and I was shocked. And when I was in graduate school at UT Austin, and I was a teaching assistant, it was only the second year that they had hired women to be teaching assistants.
I think in my generation, what my mom's generation did is really fought, the second wave feminism, and really pushing forward the idea that women can get educations and can work in a wide variety of fields, including airplane pilots. And I think what's happened in my generation is that we are taking on a lot of those roles, responsibilities. I know so many of my friends are the primary breadwinner in their families, now in their 30s and 40s. And I think that there's a kind of like almost a subdermal, like a deeper layer when women are, some of us, having more power, then we're less interested in playing by some kind of social rules or something. He's like, well, why wouldn't we talk about menopause? Like this, like I'm a full person. I'm contributing to our family, our society. I'm paying taxes. Like I should, of course, also be. I think there's almost a kind of like a confidence or a certainty that we're entitled to also. I heard some crazy statistic recently that in the United States, there's only 10% of, if you look on PubMed, the number of articles, scientific papers published about pregnancy is 10 times more than about menopause.
Yeah. Well, I think expectations, you were raised with a different expectation. Do you remember when you went on you took that year off between high school and college, and you went on that trip? And as I remember it, you were asking your family, where you stayed for a time, why would your father send you, a girl, on a trip like this?
To India, yeah, I did a homestay there, and they just couldn't, they were asking me how much was the flight and how much was this study abroad program, and why would you have two brothers and your brothers have never been to India? Why would your father pay for you to come? Like, but I also think with taking on more responsibility in families, a lot of women I know in my age, I don't know if your wife feels like this, Shay, but like we're exhausted, we're over functioning, we're doing too much, we're lacking family networks close by, the childcare work has, there's all these podcasts recently about how shocking it is that the birth rate is plummeting. Mm-hmm. I can tell you why. And I think
go ahead.
I think just being open about what's happening with our physical health and our hormonal changes is kind of part of that. When you're just maxed out, it's like you have no capacity to hide something, or you don't want to make someone uncomfortable by talking about your hot flashes. It's like I think it's like an honesty is coming.
Yeah, I think you both are onto something. It seems to me, in a general sense, generationally, there was some kind of shift in like openness to talk about things or have communication. I just recorded a podcast with my dad that's probably going to go out before this one, which was kind of amazing, honestly, to have my dad like meet me in this space of conversation or whatever. Not that we haven't had a lot of good open dialogue over the years, but it just makes me think that overall, certainly there's more awareness and more openness to discuss things that used to be like taboo to ever talk about, you know?
Absolutely. And I have to say, to be fair to the wonderful men that are out there, I was Monday was a holiday here, and I was at a swimming pool with my kids and my partner, and I looked around and I saw like so many dads being dads. And it was just so heartwarming, It was like all these dads playing in the pool and on the slide with their kids. And I thought and I was talking to my mother-in-law about it. She's Austrian, and she said, it just wasn't like that when my partner was a kid. Like if you went to that public pool on the Monday after Easter, it would be all the moms there. And so that's cool too in the shift.
I think that's true. I've always made the joke, like, I changed way more diapers than my dad did. That's for sure.
Yeah. And think about this generation, this next generation. I find it so hopeful who we're raising, like them having that kind of physical connection with their dads and seeing their dads.
I will say this though, with all the increased openness and information available to people, there does seem to be I don't know, maybe other things that have come about. Like one, it seems to me that women experience menopause in really different ways, just like they do their period, just like we all do as human beings and human life experiences. It seems like not everybody's menopause is the same or their experience of it is. But I do know that among some of my wife's friends who live in more let's say, I don't know, fast-paced urban lifestyle environments, there's kind of an attitude of, oh, I'm so tired. And a lot of them are doing hormone replacement therapy. And then there's other folks my wife talks to who are like, this is just like the stage of life. And my wife's been sort of trying to embrace it and talked about how these experience of hot flashes, not necessarily looking at them as horrible necessarily and kind of experiencing them in different ways. And it seemed to me, I was like, you're kind of making a yoga practice of it or whatever. So I guess I'm curious, what is the sort of, is there an angle to it, or is it just about giving people information, or what's been each of you respectively your experiences of I guess you're not there quite yet, Lizzie, but maybe Judith, you could speak to what's been your experience of it and how do you think of it in terms of how you might address it?
Well, I have for a very long time understood in some unknown way that and I guess it started when I got pregnant, that my yoga practice, asana, my pranayama, my meditation practice was not always going to be the same. Because first of all, I studied in a system in which it was very strongly taught that if you were having your period, you did a certain kind of poses, especially things like supported forward bends and quiet poses that quieted down the apana energy, that energy below the diaphragm that always moves toward the feet, regardless of your position. You didn't want to stir that up by going upside down or doing strong standing poses or whatever. So I began to notice just with that it was quote unquote okay to really listen to my body. And then pregnancy changes everything. It's hard to do trikonasana when you're throwing up with morning sickness, but, the hormones are the most powerful human hormones are the most powerful drug that there is, in my estimation. And then as I got older, then there was kind of a, time when I was no longer having children, and I just kind of went along in a rhythm. And then when I started approaching perimenopause, it was a little young for me. I was 42, so Lizzie could follow after that or not, but often it's similar to your mother's. And I just didn't feel like doing bakasana and arm balances. I wanted, when I wasn't having a period, which was jumping around and irregular, I craved supported back bends lying over bolsters or whatever, and supported inversions, especially chair shoulder stand or Viparita Karani with a bolster under your pelvis, your legs up. And I started talking to some of my peers, and they said the same thing, and I really noticed and really even more deeply began to understand that it's a dance between our practice and our life, and that our practice needs to serve our life, and our life needs to create space for our practice. And this is a dance, and that there is absolutely nothing, quote unquote, wrong or a mistake about letting our practice evolve to fit our hormonal picture, our age, our health, our menopausal status. And so I like to say, we don't do yoga to be flexible, although you usually start that in your 20s when you want to do, every extreme pose. But we practice yoga to become adaptable. And that's a life skill. And I think that's what has happened for me. My practice has evolved just like my hair's got gray in it, and it's the natural rhythm of life. And I want to be in harmony with that. And so I have learned to listen more to my body instead of demand of it, I spent many decades demanding of it, and to do X or Y on the mat and off the mat, and it had a very high standard for every part of my life. And now I'm easier. I have a easy flow of love and connection now with who I am and how my body is and what my life stage is. And I do practice every day. I stand on my head. I do some pretty deep back bends some days, but I listen more. I get on the mat, and I think I'm at a place now where I'm content to listen to my body in my practice. And I think that's a fabulous blessing.
Well, that seems to me to be an example of where my wife was coming from, or looking for inspiration from, to sort of embrace her menopause as like a life stage, and she was sort of like feeling she needed to do some more yoga practice, but of course in the way that you're describing, where it's like meeting her situation, because that she felt like she needed to be with herself in that kind of way. But that just is different than some of her friends who are like, it sucks, and you're like getting treatment. It's like a different mentality, it seems like.
Well, you know what, Lizzie, excuse me a second. Life can sometimes be difficult, but that doesn't mean we have to meet it with difficulty. So what's happening is it's not the situation that's the problem. It's my beliefs about the situation. It's my perception about this change. And our society is so youth-oriented that anything that happens to our body that we don't like getting gray hair, we want to cover it up, or we want to get surgery, or we want to take a pill, or we don't want to feel what we're feeling. And that is just so deep. That vein runs so deep of rejecting the present moment. And yoga is at odds with that, because yoga is teaching us, in the broad sense, to make friends with the present moment. There's a lot of joy. For one thing, a lot of women have more energy after menopause because they're not losing blood every month. And it often correlates with being at a stage of child rearing and possibly, in work, where often you can really enjoy that stuff now. You can enjoy your work in a new way because your children are sufficient and grown or close to it, and there's not such a demand. It has its benefits. And I want to just say one more thing about hormones before I know Lizzie has a lot to say. Is that when you go into menopause, you do not lose all your estrogens. You still have estrogen, it just goes down. So it's not enough estrogen to cause a breakthrough of the menstrual period. So you still have it. And so you still have the surges a little bit, but it's modified. So I like to think about 3 days a month, I act like I have a period in my practice and do those quiet poses, because there is still a rhythm. It's just very quiet.
I was just laughing to myself at the phrase, I know Lizzie has a lot to say.
Well, I mean, is it different from your vantage point? Are these women that you said, is it different in Holland maybe than in America? It could be a lot of factors, I imagine.
The first time I noticed something about menopause was off about the topic was I was in my 30s and I was teaching a bunch of restorative yoga workshops. I did it a couple of times, like a tour in Australia. And I was, naively sort of enthusiastic. And I was teaching these week-long workshops. And over again, I would say to women who, to me, looked like they were definitely in perimenopause, if not already done menstruating, because they looked to me like they were 55, 60, 65. And I would say, these poses are great. Let me show you, supported shoulder stand. This is so great for menopause, for perimenopause. And then they would look at me like I got this reaction over and over where it would suddenly like shut down the conversation and people wouldn't want to say that was them, it was this strange sensation of taboo that I noticed when I was younger, and it kind of planted the seed in my mind. I think that was probably the genesis, the very, very early genesis of this course that we've made now about menopause and yoga. And I think that part of why menopause is taboo is because it's related to loss. It's a closing of a door. There's a finality about it. You are no longer, you're ending one phase, your fertility phase, your possibility of pregnancy phase. You're, in some ways, there's a lot about youth and sexual attractiveness, and that kind of zingy power is fading. And like I was just talking to someone today and she said, well, I'm 44 now, and so my next big birthday is 50, and then the next one is 60, and then I'm like, it's like it's related to loss and letting go of something. And that's why I love so much, Mom, what you just said, and like sort of one of our big taglines for this course that comes from Mama, that's menopause is not a mistake. I find that so comforting. To hold that, to remember that, to feel that, to use that as a mantra, that these changes, this cycle is part of it. Just like we would say maybe death is not a mistake. It's part of the life cycle, and learning to embrace and accept that.
And that's the freedom. That's what moksha, your Indian name, moksha, freedom, that's about living in freedom, Lizzie. To me, there's a rhythm to this body's life, but that there is something deeper about living. It's the consciousness level that is where we need to spend our time more and more in the present, and connected with that consciousness. And menopause is just another opportunity to let go, which is the basis of all yoga. Beginning with asana, you let go. You let go. You let go in shavasana. You learn to let go. Learning this, just another deeper way to let go. And there's always freedom on the other side of letting go. It might not be the freedom that you thought would be there, but there is always freedom on the other side of letting go.
Ooh, I like that so much. I'm writing it down.
letting
I think it's beautiful, but it's very different than the conversation my wife's been having with her friends, I feel like, because it seems like some people seem to be experience menopause, not necessarily like a mistake or anything, but almost it's like what you said before, that we're kind of obsessed with youth and people are living these like whatever high impact lifestyles or something. And so, they don't feel good. They have low energy or they have these hot flashes and they're like, why wouldn't I do an intervention with hormone replacement therapy if it's going to make me feel better? And again, I don't have any problem with it, people doing hormone replacement therapy. I know some women, it's really helped them. But at the same time, it just sounds, it's a very different idea about menopause or the idea of treating it as opposed to embracing it as a natural cycle of your body's life, those are different. Would you say, aren't those different kind of like sensibilities or like approaches? Does the workshop like address like some of the other interventions that are being done for menopause at all?
We talk some about it, but we're really conscious about staying in our lane, our kind of scope of practice as yoga teachers. So we say 1,000 times in the course, like, consult your healthcare provider, because that's not really what we're empowered to share. I just recorded yesterday 2 of the science sessions with Mary Richards, and one of them was about the menopause belly. And one of them was
my wife said that this morning when I asked her, she's like, yeah, the belly thing. And I was like, what's the belly thing? So you just referenced that. What is, do you mind sharing what that is exactly for the men who are listening or others who might not know what you're referencing?
Well, many women experience that through the shift in the hormones that they attract more fat onto the belly and the shape of the body changes. And there is a lot of, resistance to that. I mean, I'm like number 1 on that list. That's not, I'm okay with letting go of everything except for like, I don't want to excel. Like what? I would have done that.
Exactly. Yeah.
May I insert, Lizzie?
Jump in, Mom. Yeah.
Is that there's this sort of rule of thumb, you gain 10 pounds or something because your metabolism shifts. And the interesting thing is, when you start losing estrogens and progesterone, some experts feel it's the loss of progesterone that affects the bone health, the potential of osteoporosis, not the estrogens. But when these hormones begin to lessen, then the body responds by putting on more weight, which and in your fat tissue, you store estrogen. So maybe this is a natural process that evolutionary process that the body puts on a little more fat so that it can have these stores of estrogen that can help bone health and other aspects.
Which I think is fascinating, really a fascinating hypothesis. And the other things that Mary talks about in the course in regard to the menopause belly, Jay, are like hysterectomy, other surgical interventions that start to add up by this phase of life, prolapse, what's happening with the visceral column, and then like incontinence. These are all very real physical body experiences that women are going through. And again, we're not doctors, we're not talking about it from that perspective, but Mary is a licensed yoga therapist. Mom's been teaching yoga for 173 years. So we look at it from the perspective of what can asana offer, pranayama offer, restorative yoga, meditate, like all of the tools in the yoga toolkit. How can they serve our bodies and our menopause belly? What could we, and from Mary Richards is not afraid of teaching a plank pose and keeping you there for way too long. You know what I mean? Like some of it's on that side, but then there's a lot of other, this course has a lot of restorative yoga incorporated in it. And we're actually doing a free event on the menopause belly in April, near the end of April. So there's a link. Hopefully, Jay, you can include it in the show notes. There's a link to sign up. We're doing 2 big free classes. One's called Beyond, Yoga Beyond Menopause Mom is teaching. So that's going to be what happens next. And then Mary Richards is doing the Menopause Belly.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.